Hey guys, you might think you're a restless sleeper, up at 3 a.m., tossing and turning, then passing out at 10 a.m. like a snapped tree branch. But trust me, if you lived in the Middle Ages, your sleep schedule today would feel like an absolute luxury. Because back then, sleep wasn't just rest. It was a communal, itchy, noisy, and often pig-involved adventure. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing who's out there sharing these stories with me around the world. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan if you like a little white noise, and let's slip into tonight's journey together. You start with a bed, or at least something that resembles a bed. If you're a peasant, 95% of everyone back then, your bed is a pile of straw precariously situated under a thatched roof that hisses when the wind blows. There's no mattress, no cozy blanket, no memory foam pillow cradling your dreams. Just straw, burlap, your tired body, and some insects that have probably named each other because they see you so often. And don't think you're sleeping alone. Unless you're a noble, and even then, the concept of a private bed is a fantasy. You sleep with your parents, siblings, babies, maybe a neighbor passing through, and a vast warm pig snoring at your feet. But the strangest thing wasn't the number of bodies and species in your bed. It was how people slept. In two shifts. Medieval folks slept in two chunks. First sleep began just after sunset, around 7 or 8 p.m., for a few hours. Then they'd wake up. Like, properly wake up. Eyes open, sitting up, puttering around the house, maybe whispering sweet nothings under a musty blanket. This midnight gap was called the watch, an unpaid night shift with no hot tea, just darkness and the scent of root vegetables. If you catch my drift, people used it to pray, reflect, toss logs into the fire, or create the next generation. Afterwards, they'd drift into second sleep, lasting until the rooster screamed or the porridge pot clattered. Everyone did this. It was the norm. Maybe because there was no electricity, no tick-tock, and no looming deadlines keeping them up until 2 a.m. The body followed the sun and the mind went along with it. Modern historians still debate why we stopped sleeping this way. Some blame electric lights. Others blame the Industrial Revolution. You? After hearing all this, you want to blame the cat that jumped on your face at 3 a.m. But back to your bed. You didn't sleep alone. It was a crowd. It could be 6 people. It could be 10. Not because you liked snuggling, but because it was warm. When you had no central heating or glass windows, body heat was your HVAC system. Unless someone farted, then the whole system crashed. Older people snored softly. Children kicked wildly. Pigs snorted. Cats clawed. Someone sleepwalked. And you just lay under a blanket resembling a damp dish towel, praying morning would come, and that all your toes would still be attached. And if you think the nobles had it better, well, they had goose-down mattresses, oak bed frames, embroidered linens, and fancy bed curtains. But they also had lice and fleas, and sometimes a servant sleeping at the foot of the bed, or in the bed, because even royalty couldn't escape the medieval roommate lifestyle. Some people even slept sitting up, especially monks. They believed lying fully flat tempted sinful dreams. If you dreamt an angel led you to plant cabbage in a forest, that was a good omen. Have you dreamt of kissing a talking goat? Off to confession, immediately. So, my friend, next time you're lying in a clean bed, head on a soft pillow, only disturbed by a midnight email notification, smile. At least you're not in the middle of winter, on a dirt floor, surrounded by 5 relatives, and a judgmental chicken waiting patiently for a second sleep to arrive. After you finish what people call the second sleep, usually from around 2 or 3 a.m. until the rooster crows, you wake up in a state that's groggy, frozen, and unsure what day it is. Not because you're busy, no one in the Middle Ages cared what day it was, but because you spent the night wedged between your brother, a niece, and a cat with a personal vendetta. The morning doesn't begin with coffee or a gentle alarm chime. It starts with someone sneezing, someone else kicking you off the straw bed to grab firewood, or, always, the rooster. The rooster graduated from the Wake the Entire Village Through Pure Rudeness Academy. You rub your eyes and glance around the dim room, the only light coming from a few dying embers, and a thin streak of sunlight barely piercing the pig bladder stretched across the window frame. You hear yawns, bare feet on dirt floors, and the resigned sigh of someone discovering the water bucket has frozen solid, and now begins trying to forget the night and hoping tonight will be better, even though you know it won't. There weren't any 10 steps to better sleep lists back then, but people had tricks, beliefs, and what we'd now call slightly odd rituals. For example, sleep position mattered. Facing east while sleeping was thought to bring peace. It's the direction of the sunrise and heaven. Facing west? That was the direction of death, darkness, and dreams, where a sentient onion chases you through a graveyard. Then came folk remedies. Sleep with a knife under your pillow to ward off nightmares. Never sleep with your head uncovered, or ghosts might enter through your hair. Hang rosemary or dried garlic above the bed to keep away wandering spirits, or more practically mice. And if you had insomnia, no melatonin, no sleep podcasts. You might be told to sip herbal water boiled with a bone from the graveyard, or be summoned to the village midwife witch for a whispered spell in your ear as you nodded off. If you were a monk, sleep was even harder. Monastic orders had fixed prayer times, even in the coldest, sleepiest hours. In some places, monks had to rise at 2 a.m. for prayers, standing in a stone chapel that felt like a medieval freezer. Oversleep? You might be punished with penance or scrubbing the latrine with a leaf. One interesting thing, sleep wasn't private. No one found it odd to sleep beside half the village. There was no my space. Bedrooms were living rooms, gathering rooms, and dining rooms. Sleeping next to others wasn't a nuisance. It was survival. You needed the warmth. You needed someone to tend the fire. And in the pitch-dark woods filled with wolves, ghosts, and your cousin's imagination, being together meant peace of mind. But togetherness came at a price. You knew. The person who snored like a saw through firewood. The sleepwalker who mumbled about turnips while pacing in circles. The farter who followed the lunar cycle. The child who always wet the bed. And you, amid this symphony of chaos, still had to shut your eyes and pretend none of it was strange. Don't forget, candles or oil lamps were expensive. No one burned light while sleeping. The darkness was total. A thick, breathing kind of dark. And in that blackness, your imagination wandered. A rustle, a thief, a whistle, a ghost, a draft through the wall. Probably your great-grandmother sending you a cryptic dream message. To sleep in all its simplicity was an act of bravery. And even if you were nobility, you may have had a warmer bed, embroidered curtains, and goose-feather pillows. But you also had a chamber pot under the bed, and the risk that a sleepy servant might accidentally kick it over at dawn. This means that at some point, everyone got rudely awakened for reasons no one dared speak aloud. So next time you're tossing and turning on your cloud-soft mattress and complaining, "I just can't sleep," try to imagine lying on damp ground, under a wool blanket as itchy as a hedgehog, between your grandma and a pig. And you'll realize, one sleepless night, it's still pretty luxurious. Whether you were a humble peasant or a noble constantly smelling of rose oil, there was one thing everyone in the Middle Ages had to face every night: the weather. And not the, "it's a bit chilly today" kind you complain about on Facebook, but the bone-deep, skin-biting cold that made you feel like surviving the night with all your toes still attached deserved a celebration. No central heating, electric heaters, oil radiators, or cozy Japanese heated blankets existed. The only thing standing between you and becoming a human icicle at midnight was a pile of straw, several layers of wool, and the warmth of another body, or a pig's, depending on your level of desperation. And smoke. Lots and lots of smoke. Do you think a quiet night sounds peaceful? Think again. A peasant's home at night was often filled with smoky air from burning firewood drifting lazily around a room with no proper chimney, sticking to everything: your hair, clothes, and general mood. That's why many people back then woke up with red eyes and voices that sounded like they'd been chain smoking for 30 years. Back to our story. If you're wondering, how did people even survive those freezing nights? The answer is, they adapted. Or they died. But mostly they adapted. They wore layers. Sometimes they slept fully dressed in their day clothes, adding a thick cloak, a scarf, a head covering, and tightly wrapped wool around their legs. This was called sleepwear, but it was survival wear. Some even wore woolen mittens to bed. Certain nobles had nose covers, a little cloth flap to protect their precious noses from snapping off like autumn leaves by morning. Still cold? Then you slept close to the fire. Some families positioned their beds right beside the hearth. Was it dangerous? Absolutely. Plenty of straw fires happened at midnight. But between freezing solid and a light crisping, many chose the crisp. It even smelled nice occasionally. And then there was the classic peasant strategy known across generations, sleeping with livestock. In winter, animals weren't left out in the barn like you might think. They were brought indoors, right by the hearth, next to the humans, not out of affection, but for warmth. The cows were warm. The pigs were very warm. Chickens? Less so. They tended to screech. But if you snuggled up with a mid-sized pig, congratulations, you had yourself a living furnace. Can you picture the house now? One single room, a dozen people, a few pigs, chickens flapping about, cows snorting, smoke hanging thick, and in the middle of it all, you, trying to sleep, or at least not roll into a cow's tail. And if the wind picked up? Oh dear, medieval houses weren't sealed tight. Wind howled through the cracks like it was on a European concert tour. Creaking doors, thatched roofs rustling, someone sighing nearby, and your stomach growling from a dinner of watery gruel. Some people hung tapestries on the walls, not for decor, but to keep their spines from freezing solid if they accidentally faced north while sleeping. If you were wealthier, you might have a canopy bed, a brilliant invention for blocking bugs, wind, and the awkward view of your parents having a moment 2 feet away. Some homes built sleeping lofts above the livestock pens. The heat from the animals rose upward, making the loft warmer. Of course, so did the smell. But warmth came at a cost. Trade your sense of smell for the gift of survival. And there's one more thing modern people forget when imagining medieval sleep. Total darkness. No nightlights. No city glow peeking through the curtains. Just thick, inky blackness. So heavy you could almost feel it pressing down like an extra blanket. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, or the person beside you. All you had were sounds, and your imagination. It was the prime time for dreaming and believing in dreams more than ever. A strange dream could spark a whole family discussion at breakfast. Maybe it's a sign from the heavens, or perhaps an ancestor came to visit, or, more realistically, must have been the spoiled bean porridge. Sleeping in the Middle Ages was a full-body experience. It wasn't just lying down and drifting off. It was braving cold, dark, noise, insects, family members, mysterious smells, and the spiritual realm lurking in your subconscious. Yet they slept. They lived. They woke up the next morning, stoked the fire, stirred the porridge, and yelled mildly at the rooster for being overly enthusiastic. And you? You might be grumbling that your mattress dips slightly in the middle. Sleep well. You open your eyes. Your face is stuck to a straw. Your nose is freezing. Something is breathing on your neck, most likely the pig. Dim light filters through the pig skin covering the window. You lie still for a few seconds, trying to distinguish between dream and reality and figure out what's lying on your legs. It's a cat. Good. Across the room, someone is already up. You hear the wooden basin being dragged out, a spoon stirring porridge, and someone's spine cracking in protest. It might be your grandmother. It might be you. Welcome to a medieval morning, a morning where no one wakes up. People get fed up with lying down, sit up groggily, and shuffle toward chores. Last night, you managed to get both your first sleep and your second sleep. One before midnight, one after the watching hour. Probably a total of 6 hours, chopped into little bits with at least 3 wake-ups due to a pig rolling into your face. Not bad. In an age where the bed is straw, the blanket is a sack, and you're squeezed between 3 people and a chicken, that's an achievement. Still, when you swing your legs over and sit up, you first feel pain. Your spine whispers that it wasn't designed to lie sideways on packed earth for 6 hours. Your knees say, no. Your feet say, numb. And your back? It's thinking about unionizing. That's okay. Everyone in the house is experiencing the same thing. All around, you hear the quiet groans of people leaving a sleep that their bodies attempted more than they enjoyed. You go to wash your face. That is, you crouch over the little wooden basin near the door. Inside is yesterday's water, cold as ice and reeking of smoke. You splash some on your face like it's not just water, but a ritual for summoning alertness from the depths of past lives. Done. Refreshed? Not really. But you're awake. Partly because of the chill. Partly because someone spilt the porridge and swore in the voice of someone who hadn't slept through a night since 1322. Breakfast? Porridge. Always porridge. Today, it has a few dry beans, considered a Wednesday luxury. You eat silently, surrounded by the clinking of spoons and wooden bowls and someone scratching their back furiously. Outside, there's still fog. The puddles from last week are still there, just with a thin, frozen crust. Wind seeps through every wall gap, tickling your bare feet like nature's passive-aggressive joke. You wrap another layer around yourself, pull on your wool cap, and tie your shoes. Your body resists. Your eyes beg for rest. But you know, if you don't get out there now, old Agnes will snag all the good turnips at the market. You cannot let that happen again. You step into the yard. The chickens are wheezing. The pig is still inside, being lazy. The smell of smoke, damp straw, and something faintly sour wafts from the old milk bucket. You breathe out a puff of white mist. Sigh. Stand still for a moment. Look up. The sun isn't fully up yet. But you must go because medieval life isn't ready for you. You walk to the market, a long, soggy, slippery path polished by generations of foot traffic. Your feet are wet by minute 3. Your toes go numb. Still, you walk. You need salt. You need oil. And you've heard someone is selling onions sprinkled with herbs. Along the way, you pass familiar faces. Everyone has the same look. Tired. Cranky. Lips chapped. Everyone looks like they just survived a wrestling match with their sleep. You nod. They nod. No one says anything. I'm too tired for words. You arrive. The market is just a muddy patch. A few tables. Some cloth strung up like tents. Sellers lay out goods. Buyers stand half asleep. A child yawns and falls asleep in a pile of potatoes. No one stops them. You manage to buy a bit of beans, no onions, no salt. But you get a 30-second chat with the tavern keeper, who dreamt you became a servant in a monastery run by Latin-speaking cats. You don't ask for details. Then you head home. Your shoes are as heavy as rocks. Your hands are as cold as salted fish. All you can think is, tonight, I'll go to bed early. But you know better. Early bedtime never happens. There's still food to cook. Chickens to feed, torn clothes to patch, the fire to rekindle, and then back to that familiar heap of straw. Praying tonight is quieter, windless, pig-free. And if you're lucky, comes with one peaceful dream. Just one. That's all you need. You trudge like a weary shadow through the fog on your way back from the market. In your hand is a cloth bag filled with a few lopsided turnips and a piece of cheese, which the seller insisted was still edible if you don't sniff it. Your stomach is growling, your feet are soaked, and that kind of sleepiness, thick, sticky, and persistent, like overcooked porridge, drifts around your head like a spirit that hasn't quite moved on. Then you look around and realize that everyone else is the same. From the man hauling firewood to the older woman selling eggs to the toddler dozing on their mother's back, every face in the village wears the mark of a population running purely on instinct and ginger tea. You're not alone in your exhaustion. That shared fatigue binds you to the entire community, a sort of delayed collective slumber. The market is where people gather to sell, buy, exchange news, ask about relatives, and sneak in a nap. You see the blacksmith leaning against a tent pole, eyes half shut, mumbling, "Nail. Where's the nail?" Still holding his hammer as if dreaming he's on the job. There's Agnes, who's famously been at every market before sunrise, and even more famously, never naps. Now sitting silently, half a loaf of bread in her mouth, massaging her temples with the expression of someone negotiating with her soul. Even the donut vendor, known for being the overly enthusiastic nephew of the village priest, is slumped over a mound of dough, fast asleep like a cat who's learned to love the smell of yeast. No one mocks them. Everyone understands. Sleep is a luxury. Not just because of poor conditions, but because the medieval mind never gets a break. You worry about taxes, you worry about crops, you worry about illness, you fear that the pig may have eaten the fabric dye, you worry about the child who's been coughing for 3 nights straight. And amid all that worry, when you reach the market, supposedly a bustling, alert place, you witness a paradox. This is where people allow themselves to relax. The morning market buzzes with vendor cries, cart clatters, pig squeals, and chickens leaping from basket to basket. But layered underneath is yawning. Whispered confessions of, "I just want to sleep." The long sigh of a seller worn down by haggling, eyes glazing over as if drifting into dreamland. You sit on a stone step beside a vegetable stall. The sensation of sitting down makes your spine crack, and thank you. Holding your cloth bag, you rub your eyes. An older woman nearby looks at you, then nods. "Tired?" "A bit sleepy," you reply. "Who isn't at this hour?" She chuckles. "Every morning I say, 'Today I'll take a nap.' And every night I fall asleep waiting for the water to boil." You both laugh, and in that brief moment, something strange happens. All this tiredness creates peace. No shouting, no pushing. There was no loud commotion. Everyone understands that, after last night, after all the tossing and turning, and after getting kicked in the face mid-sleep, today is not a day for fussing. It's a day for chuckles, for gentle nods, and hoping that noon comes quickly. In one corner of the market, someone's singing. A wandering bard with a makeshift stringed instrument sings about a baker who couldn't measure sugar and a seamstress who always stitched crooked. His voice isn't great, but it's soft and light, like a blanket warmed under rare sunshine. A few people gather to listen, not because the song is thrilling, but because it's a reason to sit, to hear someone speak, to relax. And if you nod off a little, that's okay too. A young mother holds her sleeping child. The baby's head bobs gently to the rhythm of the song. And for one fleeting moment, it feels like the whole market falls still. A sleepy morning market. A community worn thin, yet still moving forward. And you realize that sleep isn't just personal. It's something the whole village shares, in shortage, dreams, silent yawns, and sighs. You get up, head home. As you pass the older woman, you nod. "Time to rest, huh?" "Yeah." My eyes are heavy. And so, the villagers leave the market like leaves drifting from trees, each carrying a bag of onions, a few turnips, a handful of coins, and a sleep that was never quite finished. You return from the market, still holding a bag of onions, your heart clinging to the idea of a nap like it's some mythical creature. You're not even sure you've ever had a proper nap. The last time was when you were 4, curled up in your mother's lap while your grandmother's lullaby drowned out the neighbor's chickens. Since then, just brief, broken, patchwork sleep. The kind where the moment you drift off, someone spills the porridge or a cow steps on the door. No one in the medieval world, from peasants to nobles, ever sleeps well. The elderly, they sleep very little. Not because they don't want to, but because of aching backs, sore legs, and minds full of memories, prayers, and the sound of bones whispering complaints. They often lie quietly, eyes closed, but not asleep. Just thinking. Sometimes about those they've lost. Sometimes count how many times mice have bitten them in their life. Older folks are like living clocks. They're always the first to wake, the last to sleep, and they know everything that happened overnight. Who went to pee, who ground their teeth, who talked in their sleep, who never came back to bed after midnight. Children are different. They sleep like there's no tomorrow. But they also wake like they've been thrown out of a tornado, screaming, yelling, "Mum, I dreamed the pig could talk." An essential part of every medieval night. You've seen a child sprawled across two adults, kicking their father in the face, accidentally yanking away the shared blanket. No one blames them, because if the kid's asleep, that's a rare silence. It's a medieval bargain you can take without hesitation. Women are likely the most sleep-deprived, not just because of the kids, but everything else. They're the ones lighting the fire in the morning, the last to sleep after cleaning up, the ones who wake when the baby cries, the husband coughs, or the water runs out. There's a woman named Maud who lives near you. People call her the Queen of Interrupted Sleep. She once shared how, one night, she was finally deep asleep when her son wet the bed. I cleaned it up, lay back down, and started snoring. Rolled over, crash, the pot rack fell. Cleaned that. Lay Euro in, not warm yet, and the chicken jumped onto the bed. That was it. She stayed up. Do you think you sleep poorly? You're a novice compared to Maud. Even the wealthy didn't sleep that much better. Sure, they had beds, goose-down mattresses, embroidered curtains, but also servants pacing around, flickering oil lamps, rats on the roof, and endless anxiety about taxes, harvests, and political schemes. One nobleman bragged he slept with 8 pillows and 5 layers of curtains. But if you asked the servant who cleaned the room in the morning, they said, he just tossed all 8 pillows around all night because he couldn't sleep. Rich or poor sleep is like a hungry cat. It comes when it wants and disappears when you beg it to stay. Some people had chronic insomnia, known then as hoes afflicted by the moon. It was believed that a full moon stirred the mind, causing restlessness and dreams. No sleeping pills. Only herbal brews, whispered charms from village mystics, and advice like old salt under your tongue and lie on your left side. Others turned to alcohol, a mug before bed to soothe the soul, but overdo it, and you wake up at midnight with a hollow head, a mouth like dry plaster, and a deep regret that your soul might have just been bartered for a bad brew. Medieval folks also believed that too much sleep was a sign of laziness or even demonic possession. So if you accidentally overslept, you'd better fake a cough, yawn dramatically, and say, "I barely slept last night," to avoid judgmental glares. The irony? Everyone was exhausted. Everyone wanted to sleep. But if you slept too much, people would start looking at you suspiciously. The strangest thing is that people still lived despite being constantly tired and sleep-deprived. Still farmed, still wove. I still raised kids. I still loved and still married and still laughed. Because sleep was a reward. It was something you snatched, scrambled for, and learned to accept, however imperfect, noisy, and warped. You look around the house, your parents dozing near the fire, the baby slumped on grandma's shoulder, the elder resting by the window, eyes closed but not asleep, and you realize maybe none of them ever truly slept but they all knew something more critical: how to sleep enough to carry on. If you think the rustic life of medieval peasants was already sleep-deprived, welcome to the monastery, where sleep wasn't just fragmented. It was supervised by God, a sundial, and one earnest monk with a bell at 3 a.m. Here, you didn't just sleep less. You slept by schedule, with discipline, with prayers attached. And sometimes you slept standing up. Yes, standing. But before we dive into that, let's rewind to the beginning of the day, because a day in a monastery was unlike any other. A monastery was a place where monks lived, separated from the secular world. No market, no wife, no shouting about turnips. Their lives revolved around prayer, labor, and keeping the soul pure. And, of course, sleep. But sleep there wasn't a rite. It was a humble ritual. Monks didn't sleep to rest. They slept to continue serving. Sleep was carved up and interrupted by nightly prayer sessions, known as the canonical hours. It often began with Compline, night prayers, around 7 to 8 p.m., followed by matins at midnight, then lauds at dawn. If lucky, you got 3 hours of sleep, woke up to pray, and maybe slept a little more. You're picturing it correctly. The original version of the iPhone alarm, but with real people. A designated timekeeper monk would go around knocking gently on doors, or, in some monasteries, ring a bell loud enough to wake the saints. If you didn't get up, if you were sent to sleep in penance, you answered to your conscience and possibly the cold stone floor outside. Where did monks sleep? Not in private rooms. They shared a communal dormitory. Rows of wooden beds, thin blankets, no pillows, and sometimes no mattress, just wooden planks, like you were training to become a human notice board. You slept upright, hands folded across your chest, no curling up, no sideways twisting, because sleeping posture reflected spiritual devotion. Lying flat too long, people might think you have impure dreams and turn your back to another monk. It might earn you a sermon on self-control. Some ascetic monks even volunteered to sleep sitting up or leaning against a wall, with no blankets and no cushions, because they believed comfort is the gateway to sin. And that gateway usually started with a soft mattress. Instead of blankets, they wrapped themselves in their robes. Instead of pillows, they might use an old prayer book. And if you dropped that book in your sleep, no breakfast for you. You just dropped the Word of God. Naturally, there was no such thing as sleeping in. After early morning prayers, monks immediately got to work, gardening, copying manuscripts, brewing ale, mucking out the chicken coop, yes, monasteries had chickens, or scrubbing dishes with divine-level determination. Fall asleep during prayers? Catastrophic. There's a story of one monk who dozed off mid-prayer. His head tilted gently to the right, swaying like a sapling. Then thud, he toppled backwards, flinging his book like a confession. The monastery turned to stare, and the timekeeper had to blow the horn 3 times to restore order. After that, they called him Brother Slumber. Of course, there were softer moments too. One older monk was given a private sleeping nook because he breathed too loudly, disturbing the others. Another was so graceful that he could nap mid-prayer while still holding the book open, eyes closed, hands turning the pages on cue. But most monks honestly tried. Sleep was part of spiritual training, a test of patience, obedience, and the ability to control the body with will. Sleeping too much wasn't praised. Sleeping too little wasn't bragged about. You had to follow the schedule, keep proper form, and avoid drooling on holy texts. And as you watch all this, you might realize that folks outside the monastery weren't the only ones struggling with sleep. The only difference? These monks struggled with purpose. A night in the monastery was a carefully sliced sequence of rest and service, silence and alertness, darkness and whispered prayer. And if you woke in the middle of the night, opened your eyes, and looked around, you might see brown-robed figures gliding silently through the shadows, without a lamp because they were used to the dark. Not everyone could live like this. But for them, sleep deprivation wasn't a burden. It was a journey. After a long day of aching knees and wooden spoons clinking against cauldrons of barley mush, you finally lie down. The old straw feels unexpectedly soft, though it might just be that your body is so exhausted, any surface now qualifies as good enough. You curl up, pull the coarse linen over your nose, and listen to the breathing of those around you. Some deep and even, some short and wheezy, one with a faint whistle like they're conversing with their dreams. Everything settles. Then, it slips into darkness. And there, between waking and dreaming, lies another world. The world of sleep. These days, you might dream about being late, forgetting your pants, or flying through a supermarket. You wake up, rub your face, and head for coffee. But in the Middle Ages, dreams were messages, warnings, blessings, signs that you should change your life, or at least your undergarments. Dreams weren't just random brain static. They were communication channels between you and the divine, or possibly demonic. Depending on what you dreamed, You might be considered chosen or cursed. Dream of clear water, a sign of spiritual cleansing. Fire, watch your words. A black horse galloping through a cabbage field? Very specific. That could mean harvest is near, or you're about to be summoned to the manorial court. And if you dream of a voice in the shadows whispering, you ate someone else's share, that's not a dream. That's a divine reminder to stop hiding cheese under the straw pile. Dreams were taken seriously. Many people kept dream journals. Others recited them to priests in the morning. Some sought out dream interpreters, often a local wise woman, priest, or elderly neighbor with too much time and a flair for drama. They'd listen and proclaim, "Ah, a good omen," or "too many beans," or "you need to confess immediately." Dreaming of the dead? Extremely common and extremely serious. It was believed that deceased relatives could visit you in your sleep to ask for help. Sometimes just prayers, sometimes to report they were stuck in spiritual limbo, which, by all medieval accounts, sounded quite damp and drafty. If you dreamed of your late grandfather saying he was cold, you couldn't ignore it. You needed to pray for him, light candles, or donate to the church. Otherwise, that dream could return. Every night. Accompanied by sighing, the smell of extinguished candles, and a chicken watching you from the corner in quiet judgment. Some dreamed of flying toward the heavens. Many took it as a sign of divine favor. Others were suspected of witchcraft. It was believed witches could leave their bodies at night to attend dark Sabbaths. And if you dreamed of cooking stew in a forest with strangers in black robes and a glowing cat, that was deeply problematic. So no, dreaming wasn't a private affair. It was a public event, a topic of village discussion, a basis for moral judgment, spiritual diagnosis, and sometimes full-blown panic. One dream could change everything. Some people left their farms to join monasteries after a vivid dream. Others were side-eyed for a week because they talked in their sleep. "No, horseradish demon, I will not eat you." A monk named William once dreamt he turned into a door and people kept walking through him, 3 times. The next morning, he refused breakfast, sat silently for 4 hours, then wrote a 12-page prayer. No one understood his dream, but no one dared laugh. Who mocks a chosen door? But not all dreams were divine. Sometimes they were just the result of fatigue, overcooked cabbage stew, and listening to Agnes tell ghost stories by firelight. It was hard to know which dreams meant something and which were just your brain burping. So, the safest response was prayer. Pray that the good dreams were angelic and that the bad ones didn't come back with garlic on their breath. Some people even slept with dream charms, little pouches filled with herbs like chamomile and lavender, and snippets of handwritten scripture. If they dreamt of a demon tugging at their foot, they believed the charm would scare it off, or at least make it sneeze from pollen. Others wrote their dreams down in the morning to leave them behind. It was believed that if you didn't record a dream, it might cling to you like garlic on your tunic. But once written down, the responsibility passed to the page. And you? Have you ever dreamed of sharing porridge with King Arthur and a fox that plays the lute? In medieval times, you'd either be called the chosen one or have holy water splashed up your nose. Because in the darkness, in the cold, among questions never answered, dreams were where people sought hope and sometimes trouble. Not every night do you dream, and not every night do you sleep. Some nights, you lie there, eyes wide open, staring up at the thatched roof, where faint threads of light leak through gaps no one's bothered to patch. Your ears catch every sound, the steady breathing of the person beside you, the rustling of limbs, the wind, the insects, and sometimes your thoughts. So loud you almost want to ask them to turn down the volume. You're not sleeping, not because you don't want to, but because you can't. And that is one of the cruelest tricks a medieval night can play. Modern insomnia comes with remedies, teas, medications, podcasts, 8-hour rain playlists, if you've got YouTube Premium. But back then, no one suggested a bedtime story podcast. The only option was Grandma's tale about a demon demanding porridge at 2 a.m. You toss, you turn. Every movement is a symphony. Creak, rustle, Oi, who just kicked me in the face? You think, I'll count sheep. But you don't know what sheep are. You remember the village has 3, and the second one always looks at you like it knows your secrets. Scratch that. It's better to count toes, if you still have them all. You're lying there, wide awake, because your back hurts. The straw pokes. It's cold. The pig is whining. Someone is sleepwalking. A cat is on your face. You're anxious. You're worried about how much you're worrying. And that baby just coughed 3 times in a row. Medieval folks understood the experience of sleeplessness, even if they didn't name it like we do. They called it things like the mind refusing to close, wakefulness of the spirit, wind-turned thoughts, or being stirred by restless air. It sounds poetic, but it wasn't pleasant. Some couldn't sleep due to illness, coughs, fevers, and body aches from relentless labor. Others were overwhelmed by noise, wind, chickens, rats, snoring husbands, crying babies, and someone whispering in the dark, "We need more turnips." Rainy nights were worse. The thatched roof couldn't hold water. Droplets would fall on your face, your toes, the cooking pot. When you're drifting off, another icy drop falls and says, "Not tonight, friend." An older man once told of a night he couldn't sleep because he heard howling from the forest. Every 3 minutes. It's like someone had an appointment with the dark. People chuckled when he shared the story the next morning. "That's the white owl. Every hoot means someone's sleepwalking." Did that help him sleep? Number. He started counting owls. People back then didn't have the concept of rest like we do. No weekends, no holidays, no Saturday sleep-ins. They worked all week, from sunup to fog-thick dusk. And when night came, they hoped for sleep. But their bodies didn't always cooperate. Many believed sleeplessness was due to a spiritual misalignment. Someone had cursed you, or you walked past an ancestor's grave without bowing. The solution? A cloth soaked in holy water pressed to the forehead, or propping your feet on a cross-shaped pillow. Some traditions say, if you can't sleep, get up, walk 3 times around the hearth, dip your fingers in the ashes, then lie back down. Did it work? Who knows? But at least it gave you something to do until exhaustion won. For others, restlessness didn't come from the body, but from the mind. You lay there, thinking of the dead, replaying yesterday's argument, and worrying that winter is near and the turnips won't last. Will your daughter be forced to marry the mildew-scented boy next door? And in that wordless darkness, your thoughts are the loudest thing. Even monks, for all their structure, weren't immune. One record tells of a young monk who couldn't sleep because he hadn't memorized a section of scripture. He wrote to his teacher asking permission to study it in his dreams. The teacher replied, "If you see the Lord in your dream, feel free to ask him." The reply didn't help, but it made the monk laugh. And sometimes, a tired laugh is the first step towards sleep. And you? If you've ever tossed and turned, listening to time pass tick by tick on the mental clock, you're not alone. Medieval people didn't have chamomile tea, or sleeping pills, or simulated rain, but they had patience. They lay there and waited, believing that sleep would come, eventually. Like a guest who's late but always arrives, and if it didn't, they still got up, slowly, lit the fire, stirred the porridge, and carried on, because life doesn't wait for you to sleep enough. Have you ever experienced true darkness? It's not the kind of dark when the lights are off, but your phone screen is still glowing. Not that twilight dimness when you stroll through the park at 8 p.m., with street lamps casting a sickly yolk-colored haze. I mean absolute darkness. Thick, pitch-black, edgeless darkness. No contours, no horizon. There is nothing for your eyes to latch onto. That was the night in the Middle Ages. When the sun went down, darkness didn't just appear, it poured. It's like someone dumped a vat of ink all over the world. And if you didn't have a candle, an oil lamp, or a relative willing to serve as a human octopus holding torches, you had 2 choices. Go to bed or sit still like a turnip. The light was a luxury. Candles were expensive. Oil lamps flickered more smoke than glow. Lighting a candle at night was like turning on the heater in winter. Comforting, but guaranteed to earn you a 3-day lecture about wastefulness. So, most villagers made peace with the dark. They let their eyes adjust. They learned to shuffle through their homes like martial arts-trained alley cats. They knew every sound, which creak was mom shifting, which scurry was a rat, and which noise was unexplainable but best left ignored for everyone's sanity. Something strange happens in true darkness. All your other senses pick up the slack. You hear more, smell sharper, feel every breath beside you, and your imagination goes into overdrive. A small click becomes an intruder, a cool breeze, a ghostly hand, a rooster crowing early. It's a bad omen. Medieval people lived with this quiet fear every night, not because they were fragile, but because darkness back then was a presence. No artificial lights, no weatherproof windows, no place to escape the night. You shared your space with it, unwillingly, uneasily. It was believed that night belonged to wandering souls, demons, and witches gathering for secret meetings. If something went wrong in the village, livestock died, someone fell ill suddenly, things went missing, people would ask, "Did anyone hear anything strange last night?" And the answer might be, there were spoons clinking, but no one was cooking. No one tried to explain it logically. There was no science, only a feeling. Beds were often pushed against walls, not to save space, but because whoever slept outside was closer to the dark. Children were shoved into the middle. Adults believed demons had less interest in kids, or at least kids were easier to push aside if a quick escape was needed. People hung charms around their beds, pouches of salt, cloves of garlic, wooden crosses. Some drew crosses in charcoal on the doors each night, just in case they needed a reason to explain any odd happenings by morning. You may think of the dark as a place of rest, but it was more like negotiating with a suspicious neighbor to the medieval mind. Not everyone feared it, but everyone noticed it. Monks were different. They were so used to the dark that they could walk from their dormitory to the chapel without a candle, without bumping into anyone, and still maintain a reverent posture. One was nicknamed Brother Knight because he could identify each monk by their footsteps on the stone floor. Still, even the bravest had their moments. One night, the village cobbler went outside to relieve himself. He opened the door and stepped into a moonless, starless yard. Just wind. Suddenly he heard breathing, right behind him. He froze. 1 minute, 2. Nothing. He turned and saw a massive shadow staring at him. It was the cow. It had escaped the pen. But from that night onward, he never went outside at night without his wife's brass bell. Think you felt fear of the dark? Try imagining a night with zero light, only dying embers for company, no comforting sounds, and the eerie sense that something is watching. Not terrifying, just uneasy. Medieval folk met that unease with habit, faith, whispered stories, and sometimes thunderous snoring to loudly declare, "I'm alive, don't even try." And you? Maybe you're listening to this in a safe room, soft lamp glowing, curtains drawn, doors locked. But deep down, some part of you understands. Darkness, when left untouched, always carries a whisper. Not to frighten you, but to remind you. Sleep comes easier when you know you're not alone at night. If you think a medieval bed was a peaceful place of rest, oh dear, how adorably naive you are. Sleep back then wasn't a gentle journey into dreamland. It was a nightly battle for territory, between you, your family, and a small army of incredibly enthusiastic roommates. They had no names, paid no taxes, but they were there every night, the creatures who shared your bed, and they were not pleasant. First up, fleas. Tireless warriors. Tiny, black, lightning fast, and capable of jumping farther than a child spotting a talking turnip. You might go to bed clean, but that meant nothing to a flea. They lived in straw, cloth, hair, and, unfortunately, other people. You couldn't blame anyone. Every person was an international airport for these things. One moment, you're lying there, eyes closed, and then, pinch, a sharp itch on your neck. You scratch, then your back, then your calf, and you realize you're not sleeping and performing an interpretive dance called the midnight itch. Fleas were such familiar pests that people named them, some after family members. Oh no, William's fleas are back again. Some tried to repel them with garlic, wine, fireplace ash, or, the classic method, giving up hope entirely. Then there were lice, smaller, stubborn, and absolute masters of hiding. In collars, in quilt seams, in hair, beards, felt hats, and anywhere human warmth lingered. If you had one louse, good news. You weren't alone. Bad news. You were starting a community. One person said, "If I'm sleeping without itching, I must be dreaming." It wasn't a joke. It was a statement of fact. Beyond bugs, you had rats. Chunky, confident, and born for darkness. Medieval rats weren't scared of humans. They knew you wouldn't chase them. You were trying to sleep, straw in your eyes, clinging to the edge of the bed to avoid someone's flailing foot. Rats would scamper across your feet, your face, your loaf of bread. Sometimes, they'd curl up next to you if the night was cold enough. One man woke up to find a rat lying peacefully on his chest, breathing steadily, like a cat, but one that occasionally nibbled your toes. And don't forget bedbugs, unseen but unmistakably felt. They didn't glow, it didn't chirp, but they gnawed on you with a silent passion that bordered on romantic obsession. You'd wake up and inspect your arms and legs. 3 itchy welts. An old woman might call them the polite footprints of the bedbug, because they always bit 3 times. Good evening, sleep well, and see you tomorrow. Of course, we mustn't forget the larger bedfellows. Pigs, chickens, cats, sometimes dogs. People didn't share their homes with animals out of affection. They did it for warmth. When the temperature dropped below, my teeth are chattering like spoons in a metal pot. A pig was a portable hot water bottle. A cat, a furry scarf with claws. You'd sleep in the middle of the bed. On your left, your little brother. On your right, your grandmother. By your feet, a chicken resting its beak on your ankle. On your belly, a cat. Under the bed, an old dog named Tumbles, famous for his nocturnal gas. It sounds ridiculous, and yet it was cozy. No one complained. It was normal. A chicken clucking at 2 a.m.? You must be dreaming of corn. A pig snorting and wheezing? They probably got bitten too. A cat scratching your face at 3 a.m.? Well, you rolled the wrong way. Apologize to the gentleman. Sleeping alone was a luxury of the wealthy. Everyone else shared, not with someone, with everything. And over time, you learned to live with it. Some people couldn't sleep without the sound of rats chewing wood, or without the warm weight of a pig's leg on their stomach. One traveler spent a restless night in a fancy guest house, clean mattress, fragrant sheets, and complained the next morning. Couldn't sleep a wink, no snoring from the next bed. You see, humans adapt. To lice, bugs, or flight-capable chickens. Sleep is still sacred even when itchy, cramped, and mildly stinky. And here's the miracle. To sleep well, you don't always need silence or cleanliness. Sometimes you need familiarity. If you think sleeping in the Middle Ages was a scene of people lying peacefully beneath soft blankets, surrounded by the gentle scent of straw and warm candlelight. I'm sorry to break it to you, but not. Because what they called a blanket back then wasn't some fluffy, colorful cotton quilt covered in cute patterns. It was usually a thick, slightly damp piece of fabric that smelled faintly of smoke and offered about as much warmth as a polite shrug. Blankets were always in short supply, and people, never in short supply. It is a classic equation no one ever managed to solve. You'd lie in the middle of the bed, arms clenched around a corner of blanket pulled tight to your chest, legs curled up like a boiled shrimp because the rest had already been hijacked to the other side. You knew who did it. That one sleeper who dreams of full-contact jiu-jitsu. Roll, spin, lock, grip, and the blanket always goes with them. You try to tug gently, hoping not to wake anyone. But the moment you pull the other side, you yank back as if some primal reflex has kicked in. Blanket under siege. Engage defensive maneuver. And thus begins a silent nighttime battle. No words, no accusations. Just two wills locked in quiet combat over one strip of cloth. Each person thinks, I'm not greedy, I want what's fair. The next morning, no one says a word, but the exchanged glances say it all. I know you stole the blanket last night. I was reclaiming my rightful corner. Please don't kick me again at 3 a.m. Maybe stop hogging all the warm spots then. The single-family blanket was a treasured item in many households, carefully patched, washed only on sacred holidays, and handled like a fragile relic. Some avoided washing it too often, fearing that every wash made it smaller and colder. Clever folks came up with hacks, everyone huddling under one oversized cloth, covering their feet with old coats. But one mastermind always waited until others fell asleep before slowly cocooning themselves into a solitary burrito of blanket. On freezing nights, people didn't sleep stretched out. They curled up tight, knees to chest, clinging to the blanket like a monk clings to faith. Stretching your legs in your sleep was risky. The moment your toes peeked out, the wind would whisper, "Hello, I'm frostbite." In overcrowded households, the blanket couldn't cover everyone at once, so people rotated. The head of the bed got the blanket first and passed it down the line as the cold became unbearable. Receiving the blanket at the foot of the bed felt like a blessing from the heavens. The blanket's nightly journey never stopped, a wandering pilgrim with no fixed address. Some monasteries solved this problem by banning shared blankets. Each monk had only his robe for warmth. No sharing, no disputes, just quiet, dignified shivering in the name of spiritual discipline. And if someone snored, there went another warm breath straight out into the cold void. Children had no patience for a lack of blankets. They would roll, crawl, or even climb over others to find something soft to crawl under. One night, you might find your little brother tucked deep inside an old goatskin coat, his head poking out the sleeve like a mouse in a traveling sack. Perhaps the cruelest fate is the sleepwalker who takes the blanket with them. You'd wake up freezing, only to spot someone across the room snuggled in your entire side of the blanket. They're not awake, not aware. I'm cuddling the blanket like it's the last warm thing on earth. In that moment, you have two options. 1. Reclaim the blanket and risk getting kicked in the gut. 2. Grab a sack of dried turnips and use it as a stand-in. Third option, the usual option. Sit up and sigh into the darkness. And yet, strangely, despite the blanket wars, the cold, the itches, the silent tugs of war, you still slept. Not because you were warm, but because you were used to it. Your body knew it had to rest, and your mind understood that sometimes all you needed was one small warm corner of cloth over your shoulder, just enough to pull you through the night. And in the morning, when the sunlight slipped through the cracks, you'd open your eyes and find yourself wrapped in your grandmother's old coat. No one knows how it got there, but you know. Someone else was cold last night, and they gave up their warmth for you. You thought the night would be quiet. What a sweet thought. But oh, it's so wrong. Because sleeping in the Middle Ages, especially in a thatched roof, mud-walled house packed with 3 generations, was never quiet. Number the night came with sound, and not the gentle kind, like rain or wind in the trees. It was a full-blown symphony of personality, every noise ringing like the universe testing its acoustics in a wooden box. The performance began once everyone lay down. The fire faded. A few sighs slipped into the air like curtains closing on the day. Then snoring. Some snored lightly, like a kitten breathing. Others sounded like someone was sawing logs with their soul. There were patterned snorers. 3 short grunts, 1 long inhale, then a 3-second pause, and repeat. Every sleeper was an instrument. Some nights, it felt like you were lying in a medieval, unplugged orchestra pit. You could recognize each person just by their snore. That's Uncle Thomas. He always whistles at the end of each breath. That's Grandma, low and steady, never out of rhythm. See, children's snores were more unpredictable. Sometimes there was just a hiccup of sound, then silence, and then a sudden gasp, like their dreams kept losing signal, and somewhere in the dark, a fart. Inevitable, and almost expected. Coarse food, slow digestion, cold bellies, the perfect recipe for a night of musical surprises. Some were stealthy, and some opened the show with flair. Sometimes it was a chorus, a round of spontaneous applause from below the blankets. No one was proud, but no one denied it either. The room would fall still if someone let out an especially loud one. Then, a quiet giggle from the far corner, and that was it. Laughter spread like fire on dry straw. No one could stop, and no one ever named names. Only the cat would silently leave the room. Then came the shifting. Straw beds were not gentle. Every time someone rolled over, it was a symphony of rustling, cracking, and my spine. Some slept still as logs. Most people tossed and turned like fish in a frying pan. Every twist and turn added a new note to the night's chaotic symphony. Even the animals joined in, refusing to be outdone. Chickens dozing on the rafters would cluck softly if they dreamed of corn. Pigs snored louder than people. Dogs panted and kicked in their sleep like they were chasing dream thieves. Cats did not snore, but they did step on faces. They cross bodies, perch on your stomach and stare at nothing like they are guarding the realm or plotting something unholy. Sleep talking was common too. Some people spoke with crystal clarity. "Oh, that shovel isn't mine." Others just muttered, bargaining for turnips in their dreams. One night, you heard your uncle declare, "If anyone steals the blanket again, I'm retreating to the monastery." No one replied, but the next morning, the blanket was split, and the middle was cleaned. But the real sleep thieves were the sounds from outside. Owls calling, wind slicing through cracks like someone whispering in Latin. Some nights you swore you heard wooden clogs clacking past the door, even though outside was dirt, and you knew others heard it too. But no one said anything, because to speak of it was to invite it in. So you all just lay still, ears open, hearts quiet, and hoped it was just a sleepy donkey. Sometimes everything did go quiet. No snoring, no rustling, no chickens. You thought, "Psh, a peaceful night at last." But that perfect silence, that's when you really couldn't sleep, because it felt wrong, unfamiliar, like the world was holding its breath for something awful. So you began to find comfort in the noise, the shuffles, the sighs. They whispered, "Ho kicked me just now." They were proof you weren't alone in the dark, and like a strange, chaotic lullaby, it carried you into restless and familiar sleep. And in the morning, someone would ask, "Sleep well?" Why, you'd smile, rubbing your neck. "Not bad, except for the chicken jumping on my head and Grandpa negotiating with the tailor in his dreams." Everyone would laugh, then move on with the day. Because back then, the night was never silent. But sometimes, that noise, it was the warmest thing you had in the cold of the century. You open your eyes. You're not sure why. No loud noise. No one kicked you, but you're awake. Eyes wide in the thick darkness, like overcooked oat porridge without the proper water ratio. This is the middle of the night. Not morning, not quite late. Just that vague hour the medieval folks called the third watch, when the world seems to hold its breath and everything feels just slightly off. And the strangest part is, this isn't strange at all. Waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a symptom, not stress. No need for chamomile tea. It was just part of a regular sleep routine. Medieval people, and many generations after, slept in two parts. The first sleep lasted a few hours after nightfall. Then came a period of wakefulness. Then the second sleep, the rest of the night until the rooster crowed or a pig flopped its leg onto your face. That middle hour was called watch time. Surprisingly, people use it to do things. You heard right, not big things, but quiet, personal tasks. Some would rekindle the fire and reheat some porridge. Others would stitch or embroider by the oil lamp glow. Some lit a candle to read, journal, or pray, and some whispered to each other. The busy daytime was never allowed, because this was also a quiet moment for spouses to talk, exchange news, and say things. The kids were asleep. The elders snore. The whole world felt paused. Just you, the person beside you, and the tender hush of shadow. One older woman once said that her husband passed away after a bitter winter. And on the first night she woke during the third watch, with no one beside her to whisper to, she finally felt the complete emptiness of the dark. She didn't cry. She lit a fire. And from then on, she got up each third watch to make tea. Alone. In silence. Not everyone used that time for feelings. Some went to pee. A common and highly strategic mission. Because the toilet wasn't in the house, it was outside. In the wind, in the cold. Sometimes, with a chicken walking past you like a night patrol officer, going outside at night took courage. You'd grab a cloak, take your oil lamp, open the door, and brace for anything. Cold wind, dew, owls, and if unlucky, the red flash of a cat's eyes mid-hunt that nearly made you drop the lamp. You'd return, feet frozen, adrenaline pumping, and sit by the fading fire, wrapped in invisible warmth from the stillness. Some used the hour to work, tidying, mending clothes, baking, chopping kindling and writing letters, praying and memorizing scripture. Or, if you were a historian, writing an entire book. Monks especially cherished the third watch. To them, it marked the border between yesterday and today. It is a sacred time for prayer, scribing, or simply strolling the monastery hallways without being asked, "Brother, where are you off to?" Sometimes, neighbors crossed paths. Someone would knock, not for anything urgent, just because they were awake. They'd chat, share news, sip some old ale, and head back. No loud greetings, no smiles are needed. Just, "Yeah, I'm up too." Some used the hour for private matters. Very private. And very natural. The third watch was when bodies relaxed, minds felt clear, and the silence was so complete that even whispers sounded like lullabies. That's why historical records note that the highest conception rates didn't happen in the evening, but between the two sleeps. Of course, not every night was productive. Some nights, you just lay there, mind foggy, eyes tired, but awake. Not hungry, not cold, not wanting to talk. Just conscious, like a sentient log. You thought about your day. I remembered you left the hoe out in the yard. Realized tomorrow is your turn to scrape the cow's tongue. Then your mind wandered to that story the old man told about the witch who lived inside a tree and wondered, what if that's true? After about an hour or two, if you accidentally plotted out your entire life, you'd feel your eyelids getting heavy again. Your body is tilted by instinct. The blanket pulled up to your chest. A scattered snore came from somewhere, and you knew. Time for the second sleep. Not long, not deep, but just enough to carry you to dawn. And in the morning, when someone sighed, "I woke up last night and couldn't fall back asleep," you'd nod, smiling. The third watch, huh? Happens to all of us. Before, there were phones, podcasts, or YouTube. Before printed books and bedside reading lamps, medieval people had one powerful weapon against the cold and the dark: storytelling. It's not storytelling for laughs, not even always for lessons, but storytelling helps people fall asleep, or at least to get the kids to close their eyes and stop poking each other under the blankets. In a straw-roofed house, when the fire had faded to glowing embers, when everyone was curled up and sighing their way toward rest, someone would whisper the familiar invitation, "All right then, what story do you want tonight?" It might be Grandma who remembered every detail even though she hadn't seen it clearly in years. It might be Dad, who couldn't resist adding creative improvements that left every bearded character sounding suspiciously like a knight in the wrong century. Or it might be the oldest child, nominated as the night storyteller simply because, for once, they hadn't started a fight. The story didn't need to be long, or logical, or even have an ending. It just required rhythm, a steady voice, a place for the mind to rest while the wind howled and the cat tried to eat your foot under the blanket. Some nights, it was a saint's tale. Glorious martyrs, glowing angels, and miracles in far-off villages where turnips sang and bread sprouted from moss. Any kid who fell asleep early would dream of flying in a shimmering cloak. Those who stayed awake to the end usually got bonked lightly on the forehead by a parent for laughing too hard when St. Gertrude punched the three-headed dragon right in its middle head. Other nights brought folk tales, trickster older men who outsmarted devils with bottomless bowls of porridge, or strange girls who accidentally married talking sheep. These tales often started reasonably, took a sharp left into absurdity, and ended with something like, "And that's why everyone in the village now fears the gray duck." No one questioned it, because stories weren't meant to make sense, they were meant to create warmth, to carry the mind far away from creaking floorboards, cold toes, and the unsettling scratch-scratch of something under the bed. Once, you heard Grandma tell the tale of the man who could hear the earth speak. It stretched across 3 nights. By the 4th, you all realized she was inventing it as she went, but no one complained. Her voice was more soothing than any wind through the rafters. Sometimes, stories carried lessons. Children learn the rules of society through imaginary characters. Disobey your mother, and you'll get lost in the woods and befriend a wolf. Sneak a second helping of pie, and a bright red pimple will bloom on your forehead, shaped like a garlic clove. Curse out loud after sunset, and the swamp witch will dunk you in her cauldron of gently simmering regrets. You still remember the night your little brother asked, "Are witches real?" Grandma smiled and said, "That depends if you believe in them, but better not test it." After that, he never opened the door after dark again. 1 point for education. Some stories were saved for special nights, festivals, the depths of winter, or when a guest was staying over. That's when tales leveled up. Dramatic introductions, juicy middle bits, and honest crowd reactions, gasps, chuckles, and the rare synchronized ooh. Of course, some stories were not allowed after a particular hour. Stories about the faceless man, the girl who crossed the graveyard to find her lost husband, the blacksmith who worked late and met someone with no shadow. Those weren't for sleep. They were to test bravery. If you could listen to one and sleep soundly afterwards, you'd be praised as solid-minded. If you couldn't sleep for 3 nights, you weren't alone, but you would be teased until the first frost. Not every night had a storyteller. Some nights, everyone was too tired. Some nights, Grandma nodded off early. Some nights, Dad was busy repairing the hoe or chasing the goat off the thatch roof. On those nights, the children whispered the stories to each other, or quietly replayed them in their minds. You once retold a whole tale to yourself, filling in forgotten parts with made-up ones, stringing together bits and pieces in your head until sleep gently crept in. It felt like one part of you was tucking the rest in, saying, "Sleep, I'll keep watch." Storytelling didn't just help children. It helped everyone keep a sliver of poetry alive. A flicker of magic. Something warm, wobbly, and kind, tucked between the harsh folds of reality. And sometimes, halfway through the story, you drifted off. You never heard the ending. You didn't need to, because someone was telling you a story, and that alone was already a dream come true. You're asleep, peacefully, curled into some unidentifiable shape, one arm hugging the pillow, one leg kicked out from under the covers because you were dreaming you were swimming in a soup pot. Then ting, a soft sound, distant, but clear. You open your eyes. Ting, ting. It's not a dream. It's the church bell. A sound that's both solemn and shockingly aggressive in the middle of the night. It slips through wooden walls, glides over the thatched roof, and drills straight into your brain like someone tapping your nerves with a bronze spoon. You sit up, hair a mess, eyes half shut, and you ask the eternal question, "What time is it?" And then you remember, you don't own a clock. No one in the village does. The only timekeeper is the bell. In medieval times, bells weren't just for decoration. They were the community's newsfeed, the alarm clock. The push notification system is powered by ropes, pulleys, and one very sleepy monk. The monastery, church, or bell tower regulated time for everyone. Bells rang for every canonical hour of prayer, including the ones no sane person wants to be awake for. Matins in the middle of the night, lauds at dawn, and each came with its joyful round of chimes. If you lived near a monastery, that meant you never slept through the night. You might hear bells 3, even 4 times a night, sometimes with urgent peals, sometimes steady. Occasionally, a little offbeat if the bell ringer was, understandably, still half dreaming. People got used to it. Some slept straight through as if the bell were a lullaby. Others would bolt upright at the first thing like someone had flipped their internal wake switch. But bells weren't just for prayers. They were a complete public alert system. A fire, bells, a flood, bells, a death, bells. Is someone going into labor with their 9th child? You guessed it, bells. And probably a few deep sighs from the neighbors. You clearly remember one winter night. The bells rang. Not at the usual hour, not with the normal rhythm. Wild, urgent, chaotic. Everyone jumped up. Some grabbed lanterns, others picked up walking sticks. One man showed up with bread because you never know how long we'll be out. It turned out a cow had fallen into the village well. No one was injured except maybe the cow's pride. But it was still a full-scale rural emergency. The bells rang 3 rounds, and no one could go back to sleep afterwards. People gathered, half concerned, half laughing, working together to haul Bessie back up. Someone joked, she just wanted to be baptized. The next morning, everyone had bags under their eyes, but they retold the event like a prized village story. And that's the thing. Bells didn't just interrupt sleep. They connected people. Still, there were nights when you were seriously annoyed, especially when the bell rang just as you'd finally drifted into your first decent dream of the week. One with honey cakes, velvet robes, and a feast with no rats. You groaned, buried your head under a pillow, and prayed the bell would stop. But that sound had a weird ability. It could bypass all barriers and settle directly in your thoughts, like it had its front door key. Some people suffer chronic sleep loss because of the bells. An older man once told you, "I don't fear death, but I do fear the funeral bell at 3 a.m. It's colder than the wind, and sadder than watery porridge." Some villagers coped by counting the bell chimes like sheep. 1, 2, 3. By the 8th, they were out again. But if they made it to 10, sleep was over. The brain had already launched into its 2 a.m. existential crisis mode. Some tried moving their beds to the quietest corner of the house. Futile. The sound traveled through beams, walls, straw mattresses, and wool blankets. And no matter how much you complained, no one would silence the bells. Because for the community, they were the heartbeat of the night. They reminded everyone, time is passing. Someone is awake. You're part of something. Chaotic, sleepless, but still running. And some nights, you didn't feel annoyed when the bell rang. You felt comforted. Because somewhere, someone was pulling a rope, watching the stars, and keeping the rhythm of a sleeping world. You closed your eyes again. The bells faded, and you thought to yourself, next time, maybe pull a little softer. It is 2 a.m. after all. You blink. It's not fully open, just a soft flutter, like you're checking if you're still alive. A rooster crows, but it could be the sleepwalking one. You haven't trusted that rooster since it crowed at midnight after stepping on a rogue turnip root. You roll over. Your foot hits something. It could be your little sister's leg. It could be the piglet. Honestly, anything's possible in this room. A faint light seeps through the clay wall. It's unclear whether it's dawn or just the neighbor's cooking fire burning bright again. And the first question in your head is, what time is it? It's such a simple question. But in the Middle Ages, utterly unanswerable. No wristwatch, no phone. Sundials only worked when the sun cooperated, which, right now, it isn't. No one is entirely sure if the sun's even up yet. Some folks use roosters to tell the time. But as mentioned, roosters are unreliable. They crow at light, cold, or sheer dramatic instinct. Others rely on their internal clocks. They feel the time based on stomach growls, back pain, or the intensity of their hunger. Your father once said, "Feels like dawn. My belly's singing." Admirable, if unscientific. Farmers sometimes judge the time by nearby sounds. If you hear old Thomas pounding grain, it's late. He always wakes up like he's racing the sunrise. So you lie there, eyes on the straw ceiling, wondering, if I go back to sleep, will I miss something? If I get up now, is it 3 in the morning? Medieval timekeeping was a glorious, hopeless flexibility. No 7:30 a.m. or 10 p.m. Instead, they said, at first light, when the dew's still fresh, after the second rooster crow, when my stomach growls the third time. You remember your mother once saying, "Wake up just as morning begins to stretch." You asked, "When is that?" She replied, "When your father starts swearing." Crystal clear. Not knowing the time made mornings a gamble. Wake too early, and you tiptoe like a petty thief because everyone else is still asleep. Wake too late, and you're stuck cleaning the pot of congealed porridge from last night. So, most people just followed the sounds of others. Clinking utensils, crackling fire, a spoon hitting the edge of a pot. That was your wake-up signal. Still, hearing snoring, stay put. There was that one time you woke up early, bright-eyed, clear-headed. You stepped outside, took a deep breath, and were greeted by a fog so thick it could be sliced and served. You felt triumphant until you realized it was 4 a.m., and you had to sit on a stool for 2 hours, waiting for someone to open the woodshed so you could get a broom. You learned something valuable that day. Wake just right. Not too early, not too late. How do you know what's just right? You don't. You fail about 20 times and eventually get the hang of it. A man in the village is known as the human clock. Not because he's precise, but because he always wakes before anyone else and does a complete loop around the village to gather intel. Trudy's still snoring. Mason's got the fire going. No sun yet, but I smell someone's breakfast. An entire intelligence network based on noses and hearing. Some folks didn't care what time it was. They just got up when it's bright enough to see your own hands. It is a practical standard, so long as your hand isn't buried under a cat. Monks had more accuracy, thanks to church bells. The Lauds bell rang at dawn. If you ignore that, your conscience might trouble you, or a monk might tap you with his ceremonial stick. Gently, but meaningfully. But not every village had a monastery nearby. For most people, morning was just another foggy concept, like full but not stuffed, or a mild autumn breeze. You sit up. Your eyes are still adjusting. Someone's stoking a fire. Someone else is softly blowing on coals. Regardless of the hour, you know it's time to get up. You slide your feet into straw sandals. Damp. Cold. Possibly stepping on a rogue louse. You're used to it. You don't know the time. But you know today needs doing. And if you go back to sleep, you'll dream of arriving late to the harvest festival and being forced to sing in front of the entire village. So, you're up now. Let's face it. You don't remember the last time you slept through the night. Not because you're an insomniac, but because life doesn't allow it. One night you're jolted awake by church bells. Another, it's the cold. Another is a chicken stepping on your face. Another is staying up to watch the porridge. And some nights you're just too exhausted to fall asleep. And so the weariness stacks, day after day. It doesn't turn into illness. You don't collapse. But it's there. A heavy, dull weight pressing on your shoulders like a blanket that's never been washed. Medieval people didn't have a word for sleep debt. But if they had, they would have laughed and said, "Ah, yes, we call that life." You work from dawn to dusk, chopping wood, mucking out stalls, weeding the garden, hauling water, patching clothes, chopping turnips, boiling water, scrubbing floors, running to your uncle's to retrieve a spoon borrowed last winter. When night falls, you don't rest. You keep going. Clean the hearth, soothe the baby, mend trousers, boil foot-soaking water for Grandpa. Some nights, you help your mother sort millet seeds from husks, a backbreaking and deeply existential task. So when you're finally allowed to lie down, your body arrives like an old horse returning to the stable, sore, muddy, and slightly confused about why it still exists. You drift off, but never deeply. Sleep comes like a passing guest at the inn, temporary, never staying long. One night, you sleep an hour before the cold wakes you. Another, 3 hours before the midnight bells. Another thing is that you don't sleep at all. Close your eyes and breathe like someone pretending they know how to rest. And the fatigue keeps building. You start to feel slower, heavier steps, a stiff neck, stinging eyes, and that constant whisper of a thought. If I could just lie down for a little. You daydream, but not of adventure, of more work. You dream of weeding turnips. In your dream, you're still weeding. You wake up with your hands still curled in the same motion. A tragicomic loop where reality and dreams are one long shift. No one in the village complains about being tired, but everyone is exhausted. It's the default state, like feeling peckish in the afternoon or scratching your head when asked what day it is. An older man once said, "If I'm not tired, I must be dead." Everyone laughed, but everyone understood. Because here, exhaustion isn't frightening. It's luxury that's dangerous. Sleep too much? People get suspicious. Nap during the day? You're lazy. Wake up after the rooster? Expect some passive-aggressive glances. So people learn to rest while awake. An old woman can sleep with her eyes open. She spins flax, her hands moving steadily, her lips pressed shut, while she mentally revisits the pear tart from St. Martin's feast. Sometimes, she startles as her needle drops and smiles. "Oh, just saw my late husband come home in a new tunic." The woodsman naps on a log mid-whittling. The blade is still in hand, grip unchanged. It's as if his eyes just paused for maintenance. You learn to do the same. You nap while waiting for the water to boil. You doze for 3 minutes while your sibling rambles about a bald chicken. You slump like a boiled potato, then snap awake at the words, "It's your turn now." Fatigue builds, but so do your strange little survival skills. You learn to sleep standing against a post. You learn to dream for 5 minutes and wake up with an idea of what to do next. You learn to smile, even with sunken eyes, shaking hands, and sleep too shallow to recall what you even dreamed of. And the miracle is, you keep going. You wake up. You work. You smile even if you're half sleeping while you do it. Because, at that time, sleep was never enough. But determination was. You didn't need a full 8 hours. You just needed enough to take one more step, and then another. And somehow, you made it through the day. And when night comes, and you lie down again, you don't wish for anything grand. Just one night without being kicked in the face. Or if you are, let it at least be by someone you love. There is an unspoken rule in any communal sleeping arrangement. There will always be one person who snores, and there will always be one person who cannot handle it. In the Middle Ages, when entire families, and sometimes their livestock, slept in the same room, snoring wasn't a personal issue. It was a community concern, and you know this all too well. Because the loudest snorer in your house is your uncle. And his snoring, it's like nothing you've ever heard. Not the steady rumble of a windmill, not the gentle wheeze of a cat's nostril. No, his snore sounds like a wooden cart slamming on brakes in the mud, crashing through a pile of pots, and bellowing like a cow singing the national anthem. At first, everyone tries to ignore it. After all, he's family. But the collective patience erodes by the third snore cycle, when the walls tremble and the chicken on the ceiling beam falls in fright. You've seen your mother lying on her side, covering her ears with the hem of her tunic, eyes wide open, clearly debating whether she should sleep in the pigsty instead. Your younger sibling cried once, said, "That noise made me dream about a snowman eating turnips." Nobody understood. But everyone agreed. It wasn't healthy. Once, your grandmother quietly approached your uncle and tucked an onion under his pillow. When asked why, she said, "They say strong smells make a snorer turn over." It worked. He turned and snored even louder. The next night, she tried garlic, then mugwort, then salt around the bed. At some point, she may have confused snoring with demonic possession. Your father tried a more modern solution. A gentle push. Result? Your uncle paused for 2 seconds, then resumed snoring, picking up exactly where he left off like a medieval mixtape. Some say, snoring means deep sleep. Others argue, no, it's the sound of the soul trying to escape. You, meanwhile, lie there with your eyes open and ears vibrating, imagining your uncle being possessed by a malfunctioning folk instrument. Of course, your uncle has no idea. He wakes up cheerful and says, "Sleep well, everyone?" You smile weakly, holding your head like you just ran a marathon with your ears. One night you tried wrapping your ears in a rag. It worked, briefly, until his snoring hit such a pitch that the dog howled. And when the dog howls, the whole yard wakes up. That night was over. You consider passing along an old folk remedy. Let the snorer sleep on a plank soaked in vinegar. No one knows why. The smell may have driven them out of range. You tell your uncle. He laughs and says, "Give it a shot." But just so you know, snoring runs in the family. You remember someone muttering nearby, "Runs in the family like a lumber demon." After many sleepless nights, the family gradually adapts. They rotate shifts. Those who tire easily go to bed first and try to fall deep enough before the storm begins. Light sleepers choose to sleep far away or next to the pigs, where the smells are worse. But at least the sounds are predictable. You begin to recognize the phases of the snore. There's the low rumble. Now comes the sudden puff. And once you get used to it, you start to enjoy it. Like listening to a song you've heard so many times, you know when to breathe so it doesn't catch you off guard. And strangely, you begin to sleep. Even as the snoring carries on, steady like the drumbeat of some ancient documentary soundtrack. An older man in the village once said, "Anything that repeats long enough becomes a lullaby." And perhaps he was right. Snoring, if you can't escape it, you accept it. Maybe even come to love it as part of the night. After all, the one who snores is the family. And in a world filled with risks and uncertainty, having a loved one beside you, even if they roar like a wounded boar in their sleep, is better than sleeping alone. You close your eyes. The snoring starts again. Faw, rough few, or you sigh. Then smile. At least it's not the pig. Tonight, you roll over for the 5th time, then the 6th. Each time, the straw beneath you rustles like it's mocking you. Just sleep already, you empty-stomached fool. You try to breathe steadily. Close your eyes. Think of meadows, the village well, and a warm bowl of porridge. Mistake. Because the moment you think of porridge, your stomach protests. Not loudly. Just a soft, urgent gurgle, growl. As if your guts are whispering, "Don't pretend we didn't notice you skipped dinner." Technically, you did eat. A few boiled greens. A hunk of black bread left over from breakfast. A slice of pickled turnip is too salty to finish. But you know, your stomach knows. That wasn't enough. Not after a whole day's labor that lasted until sundown, hauling water, chopping grass, shoveling manure, and narrowly dodging a rear-end assault from the newly mature family cow. You're hungry, but there's nothing left. The cupboard's bare. The pot's been scraped clean. The bread was already split the night before, and your uncle ate his share with gratitude and enthusiasm. You lie there, one hand gently on your stomach like it might soothe it into silence. It doesn't listen. Medieval people were used to hunger. Not the, "oops, I forgot to go to the store" kind. But the real kind. The regular kind. Hunger with a calendar. Winter was lean. Late winter was leanest. They called it the hunger season. When stores were gone, the new harvest hadn't begun. And the cold was so deep, even turnips felt defeated. In those months, people ate anything. Weeds, roots, bark, thin porridge, thinner porridge, and something jokingly called water that once met a soup. Children learned to sleep on empty stomachs. Their mothers would rub their backs and whisper, "Sleep now, child. Tomorrow morning we'll have porridge," never specifying what the porridge would contain. Once, you tried to trick your stomach by drinking water before bed. All it did was wake you 3 times in the night, hungry, cold, and stumbling in the dark, looking for the chamber pot. Someone once said, "Try sleeping sitting up, the stomach won't grumble." Result? You banged your head on the mud wall, and your stomach still grumbled like a distant war drum. One night, you dreamed you were eating a giant, golden, buttery cake. You took a big bite. Then, you wake up, chewing on the corner of your blanket. You told no one, but your mother changed the blanket 2 days later. You've learned, when you're hungry, don't dream. Dreams of food are the cruelest kind. Old folks had their tricks. Your grandmother said, "When you're hungry, tell yourself a story. One about the best meal you ever had. Let your mind do the chewing." She'd tell you every night about an autumn day, with pumpkin cakes, stewed beans, and baked apples. You didn't feel full, but you felt warm. Others tried smells: burning onions, boiling garlic, or burying turnips in ash to trick the senses into thinking something was cooking. You smelled it. Your belly roared louder. Conclusion: hunger can't be fooled by scent alone. Sleep doesn't come like a gentle drift when hunger's too strong. It comes like a fainting spell. No dreams, no tossing. Just your body saying, "System shutting down. Try again later." In the morning, your eyes burn, your head is foggy, but you still get up, still light the fire, still fetch water, still chop wood. Because everyone does, everyone's hungry, but everyone still moves, and you realize hunger is part of the rhythm of life. Not a shame. It's just a challenge you've beaten too many times to fear anymore. Tonight, you lie there again. Empty belly, heavy heart, heavy eyes. You hug your pillow, rest your leg on your siblings, reclaim the corner of the blanket that was just stolen, and you think, just get through tonight. Maybe tomorrow morning. There'll be porridge. No promises, just hope. And sometimes, hope is the only thing that fills you. You know who they are. Every night. Without fail. That person lying next to you, maybe your cousin, sibling, uncle, or grandmother, always starts the night looking innocent enough. Curled up neatly, silent and harmless, like a boiled potato. Then you blink. Just for a moment. And when you open your eyes again, the blanket is gone. Not partly. Not just a corner. The blanket is now wrapped around them like a wintering silkworm in a cocoon of betrayal. You shiver. You wonder if you're dreaming. But no. The night air creeping over your bare shoulder is very real. The scent of cold turnip lingering in the room, very real. And their soft, peaceful snore, as if they're being gently tucked in by clouds and baby sheep. Painfully honest. You sigh and begin your mission. Operation Blanket Recovery. You can't pull hard. You'll wake everyone. You can't crawl over them. That'll earn you a reputation as a sleepwalker. All you can do is inch. Gently, slowly. Every centimeter of blanket regained feels like a minor miracle. Almost emotional. Then, just as you reclaim a precious corner, they roll over. Whip. The entire blanket vanishes in one smooth, villainous motion, as if they'd been training in silk dancing during their dreams. You groan silently. You stare at the ceiling for comfort. You reach for that old coat hanging nearby and lay it across yourself like a shredded banner of honor. The blanket thief never remembers. In the morning they yawn, hair a mess, and ask, "Did you sleep well?" You look at them like your own blood has betrayed you. They smile, clueless. And you've just survived a night on a frozen battlefield disguised as family. This isn't rare. Medieval folks were used to shared sleeping spaces, and in that setting, a blanket was strategic property. There were never enough. One big blanket was divided among 3, maybe 4 people. The heavier ones were prized, harder to steal. But also, when someone rolled, the whole thing tended to migrate. Some families tried the divide it equally method. They drew a line down the middle in charcoal. Ineffective. Because everyone thought, I'm just taking my share, plus a bit from my shoulder. And soon, that bit crept to someone else's knees. Those robbed of their share had three options. 1. Clench your teeth and embrace the cold. 2. Cover yourself with a sack that once held corn. 3. Slowly, patiently reclaim the blanket inch by inch. 4. Until the other side gets cold and rolls over in revenge. That last one was the most common, a strategy game of patience and opportunity. Some got more creative. You once saw your younger cousin tie the blanket to their wrist with a string. They were convinced that if it got pulled, their hand would come along. They woke up with a numb arm and the haunted stare of someone who'd been through a war. Your grandmother used to tell you, when she was young, she shared a blanket with 8 sisters. Whoever was strongest got the blanket. Whoever was cleverly slept close to whoever had it. And the youngest? I slept under the bed in a potato sack. That may be why she always sleeps fast and light. She used to say, sleep late, no blanket. Sleep early, at least warm shoulders. You've wondered why no one just made another blanket. The answer is simple. Thick fabric was expensive. Blankets had to be woven, stitched, padded with wool, flax, or, if you were lucky, sheep's fleece. So families guarded them like treasure. They passed them down through generations, along with the warning, protect it well, or it'll be stolen in your sleep. You learned to live with the quiet unfairness of it all. You prepared, wore 2 layers, hooked a leg over your sibling like an anchor, curled yourself up like a resentful hedgehog, and whispered to yourself, don't fall asleep before them. Sometimes, you win. You wake up still wrapped in the blanket. You smile, warm, victorious, then glance over. They're curled against the wall, shivering like a turnip in the wind. You hesitate, then give them a sliver of blanket. Not out of virtue, but because you know, tomorrow night you might be the one shivering. Have you ever dreamed? Of course you have. Everyone dreams. But have you ever had a medieval dream? You fall asleep with an empty stomach, a head full of turnip worries, and your uncle snoring, pounding through the night like someone hammering a tin bucket. And in the middle of all that chaos, you dream you're flying through a field of bread on the back of a giant catfish. In your village, everyone has strange dreams, and they talk about them like they're prophecies, or warnings, or, more realistically, side effects of mushroom porridge. Medieval people believed deeply in dreams. They didn't think dreams were just random brain static from a tired mind. They thought dreams were messages from the heavens, from ancestors, from saints, or more likely, from a very offended stomach. You once dreamed of talking to a cow in a cloak holding a tax ledger. You woke up in a cold sweat because you suddenly remembered you forgot to pay your hay tax. You told your mother. She frowned and said, "Could be a sign." "A sign of what?" you asked. "A sign you need more sleep," she replied. But dreams aren't just strange. They're noisy, because not everyone dreams quietly. In your household, at least one person talks in their sleep. Not just mumbling, full-on sentences. Sometimes even shouting. Sometimes singing. You've been jolted awake by things like, "Don't take the bucket. It's mine. It can fly." You sat up in a panic, only to see your younger sibling sound asleep, arms outstretched, grinning like they just married a goat. You started writing them down. One night, "Bread, don't betray me." Another night, "If he turns into an onion, I'll still marry him." Your collection of quotes is both horrifying and hilarious, but somehow comforting, because in a world full of cold, hunger, and exhaustion, at least there are dreams. Dreams are where there's no hunger, no stable smells, no blanket thieves, just honey cakes, warm rivers, and sometimes a talking donkey that speaks French. Elders in the village often share their dreams at breakfast like sacred rituals. I climbed the church tower, but it was made of cake. I saw my father. He handed me a garlic bulb with wings. A dream bird told me to complain less. Everyone nods along. No one asks for logic. Because dreams don't need to make sense. They're the one part of your life where things can be gloriously irrational. One night, you dream of a grand feast. Roasted meats, golden pies, honey dripping from the sky, turnips are served in goblets. You're devouring it all, and then wake up chewing on straw. You don't tell anyone. A few days later, your mom quietly changes the bedding. You learn not to trust good dreams when you're hungry. They're the cruelest kind of hope. The elders have dream tricks. Your grandmother says, when you're hungry, imagine a story about the best meal you've ever had. Let your mind chew for you. She tells tales of harvest days, pumpkin cakes, bean stew, baked apples. You're not full, but you feel warmer. Some people try to fool the brain with smells. They burn onions, simmer garlic, and bury turnips in ash. It only makes your stomach grow louder. Conclusion. Not everyone is built for aroma-based survival. On nights when hunger wins, sleep doesn't come gently. It crashes in like a fainting spell. No dreams, no movement. Just your body saying, system shutting down. Try again tomorrow. In the morning, your eyes sting. Your head wobbles. But you get up. You light the fire. You carry wood. Because everyone's hungry. But everyone keeps going. You begin to understand. Dreams don't fix anything. But they matter. They're a small rebellion against reality. A way for the mind to sneak in a bit of joy. A way out that doesn't require money, permission, or surviving the rooster's schedule. And even if someone across the room is yelling about marrying a tap-dancing onion, at least, they're dreaming. And in this complex, gritty world of medieval survival, that, in itself, is a minor miracle. You open your eyes. Everything feels unfamiliar. The ceiling doesn't look right. A leg of Ismaretlan Eredetu, Veseliesen Kozel Vana Arkodhoz. You're unsure if you're on the bed or the floor beside the bed. No rooster. No spoon clinking in the pot. Just someone breathing very steadily right near your ear. You stay still, eyes half-lidded. Your brain is scrambling. Where am I? This isn't rare. Sleeping in the Middle Ages is like playing real-life shuffleboard with people. You might go to sleep in one corner and wake up in a completely different one. Not because someone moved you, but because you twisted, rolled, nudged, and nudged back all night. By morning, a cubist artist looked red and rearranged the room in their sleep. You vaguely recall going to sleep near the wall. But now you're next to the door. You're hugging a pillow, or maybe a bundle of straw tied with onion twine. And the soft thing under your head? That's your little sibling's leg. You know, because it has a mole shaped like a turnip. You don't dare move too much. Any wrong motion might wake someone. And if you wake grandma early, let's say good morning will be replaced with quiet scripture-flavored grumbling. One time, you woke up in the chicken coop. You're not sure how. You remember going to sleep angry and flopping outside. In the morning, 2 hens were asleep beside you, and one rooster stared into your soul like, well, good morning to you too, whoever you are. People in the Middle Ages didn't sleep in private rooms. No assigned beds. Children slept wherever there was space. Adults took what was available. If guests came, you were bumped to another bed, and sometimes woke up on top of a firewood pile. That fuzzy, foggy feeling after waking up? Normal. It's even endearing. Once your little sibling woke up, looked around, and asked, "Is this our house?" The whole family laughed. You said, "If it's not, we've just trespassed very politely." Sometimes, even adults need a reboot. Your dad once woke up, sat up, looked at you, and asked, "What holiday is today?" You answered, "It's Tuesday." He nodded. "Good. Thought I missed plowing season." Then he went right back to sleep. A neighbor once got up at midnight thinking it was dawn. She was fully dressed and stood in the courtyard, waiting for the rooster. Waited, waited. Finally, the rooster crowed. That's when she realized she'd put her shirt on backwards. Sleeping with others messes with your sense of time and space. You don't remember who slept next to you. Sometimes, the left side sleeper becomes the right side snorer. Sometimes you hug a pillow. Sometimes an axe. For chasing rats, of course. And you often wake up curled beside a pile of turnips still in the kitchen yesterday. But that confusion, that dreamy disorientation, it's part of feeling at home. Because even if you don't know where you are exactly, you know you're home. Still surrounded by the scent of dried roots, hearth ash, and old wool. I still hear familiar breathing. Still, a cat curled at your feet. Still, the sound of water began to boil. Still, the scent of thin morning porridge slipped through the walls. You may not know where you are in the first few minutes, but then, things click. You recognize the slanted wall on the south side, where you always lean the broom. You hear your mother's footsteps, soft but brisk. You spot that dull gold glow, not sunlight, but a reflection from the polished copper pot you scrubbed yesterday. You exhale softly, then sit up. The blanket's gone. The straw beneath you looks like a battlefield. Someone nearby is still sleeping, mouth slightly open, murmuring like they're arguing with an onion. Another person shifts, unknowingly using someone else's arm as a pillow. You yawn, long and slow. Even if you don't know where you woke up exactly, you know one thing for sure. You're ready for another day. There's a strange moment in the morning, when the world begins to stir. It's not when sunlight pours into the house. It's not when people stand up and stretch. It's that in-between moment when the first sounds sneak through the quiet like someone flipped the village-wide wake-up switch. First comes the sound of the fire being rekindled. Someone, usually the earliest riser, maybe your grandmother or your father if he's trying to earn points today, bends over the cold hearth, stirs the ashes, then blows gently like coaxing a sleepy dragon back to life. The fire crackles. It is a tiny sound, but enough to make tired ears twitch. You don't open your eyes, but you know it's begun. Next, dip the ladle into the water pail. A soft clunk against the wooden bucket. The splash as water is poured into a pot. The sizzle when droplets fall onto warm embers still smoldering from the night. Then comes the creaking of the bed. Someone, maybe your uncle with the crunchy joints, sits up. Hands push down. His back crackles like someone peeling an ancient onion. The animals join in. A cat stretches and meows lazily like it too, resents mornings. Chickens squabble on the rafter, jockeying for the best perch with a courtyard view. A rooster crows, on cue, perfectly timed like it was hired for this. You hear it all. Eyes closed, body still wrapped in your blanket, if you were lucky enough to keep it. But your mind is already halfway awake. Then come the whispers. You up yet? Still early. Early what? The rooster crowed. That same rooster crowed at midnight yesterday. Little hushed exchanges, close to the ear, like everyone fears breaking something fragile called morning peace. Once you heard your grandmother ask your mother, "Shall we make a little perilla tea?" What for? To drink, of course. Can't brush your teeth until you've had something warm. You open your eyes. The ceiling looks the same. The straw beneath you has flattened even more. Your arm is numb from hugging a wooden axe instead of a pillow. And somewhere nearby, someone's scratching their back with a wooden spoon. You don't know how you know that sound, but you do. That's your uncle, an expert. Some kids start to roll around, not fully awake, just wiggling. One mumbles their last sleep talk line. Another smashes their face into a pillow, desperately trying to re-enter a dream about a talking pear tree. The pig in the pen grunts softly, demanding an early breakfast. There's the clatter of a pot lid being lifted. Maybe someone checking for any porridge left. A wooden ladle scrapes the bottom with a sighing shh, and porridge is scarce this morning. Footsteps pad softly. Your mother, always the first in the early shift. You hear her straighten the curtain flap, then a soft fup. The oil lamp has been completely snuffed. Morning has arrived. Once all the sounds fit together, the rustle of straw, the weighty drag of the water bucket, the cat's second yawn. You exhale. No one has called your name yet, but you know that moment is coming. It always begins with the exact words. Hey, wake up. You pretend not to hear. Hey, get up. You breathe harder, hoping it looks like deep sleep. Wake up. And something thuds gently against your foot. Not hard, but unmistakable. A rogue straw pillow, or a wooden spoon missile. You open your eyes and smile. Not because you're ready for the day, but because you made it through another night. And those first morning sounds, groggy, clumsy, even a little ridiculous, are proof of one thing. You are not alone. The world is awake. And so are you. Everything is fine. You're curled up in your blanket, or what's left. The straw is still a little soft. Your eyes are still sticky with dreams of pastries and wool quilts. Your ears pick up the soft crackle of the heart, a distant yawn, and your mother whispering to Grandma about how the turnips are growing too slowly. You know it's time. But you haven't moved yet, because you know that moment is coming. The fated moment. The brutal crossroads between warmth and cold. The moment when you must place your foot on the ground. You take a deep breath. Gently lift the blanket, or snatch it back from whoever stole it in their sleep. Slowly. No rush. You hover one leg over the edge of safety, dangling. And then, contact. The first sensation is cultural shock. The beaten earth floor, hard, coarse, and steeped in the soul of 273 winters past, has no sympathy for your fragile human foot. It is cold to the marrow. The kind of cold that makes you wonder if you've stepped onto a wine cellar floor or directly into the underworld. You yank your foot back up instantly, like a cat touching water. Then you have to put it back down. You can't fly. You can't crawl through the morning. So begins the walk of frozen coals. Tiny steps. Tiptoeing. Each move a whispered complaint. Why didn't I prep straw sandals last night? You are not alone. Everyone has faced this dawn agony. Some tackle it by sprinting, a mad dash from bed to the hearth, hoping speed will defeat sensation. Usually, speed makes you trip over the cat sleeping next to the water pot. Some lay out dry leaves in patches across the floor, little oases to hop between. You tried that once. The cat thought it was a trap and shredded everything overnight. Your grandmother, ever wise, has a different strategy. She folds a piece of old wool cloth 3 times and lays it neatly beside her bedding. No one dares touch the royal rug. She steps down like a queen, then glances over at you, hopping on one foot, and says, "Preparation is the key to long life, child." You smile and plant both feet on the floor. Still cold, but less shocking. The tingle creeps from your toes up your calves, like your blood is negotiating with the dirt. I'm just visiting. I swear. The fire crackles louder. The smell of boiling turnips and slightly scorched onions drifts through the air. You hear the broom start sweeping. Your mother pours water into the pot. You know, it's time to move forward. One hand rubbing your goosebumped arm, one eye still blurry, you tiptoe toward the hearth. Every step is a test of will. There's no wooden floor, no carpet. Just cold, hard-packed earth, scattered pebbles, and probably a sleepy beetle judging you from beneath your heel. But once you're near the fire, it's worth it. You sit down, feet outstretched near the heat. The warmth creeps into your skin, then your bones, like your legs are returning to life. You curl your knees in. Your eyes finally open properly. Your body realizes you're still alive, and you're warming up. Someone hands you a bowl. Inside is a bit of thin porridge. You don't care. You take it, blow gently, and sip like a royal delicacy. The rest of the family gathers one by one. Bare feet patter across the room. Quick steps and that signature squeaky scrape of dry heels. Someone scratches their leg. Someone else presses their foot to another's calf, hoping to steal a bit of warmth. No one complains, because it's morning, and cold is standard. You start recounting last night's dream, about a dancing sheep, about a cat in armor, about your dream of having shoes. Everyone laughs. Grandma says, "Keep dreaming. Maybe someday the shoes will find you." You exhale. Long. No hurry. Your feet are still a little numb, but your mind is awake now, and you understand. A medieval morning doesn't begin with an alarm clock. It begins with bare feet and a frozen floor. You're sitting in the yard. I'm still trimming grass, eyes on the pile of dry vegetables you've just sorted. And then, like someone tapped your shoulder with a pillow, the drowsiness arrives. No warning, no permission. Just a light mist settling over your mind. Your eyes blink slowly. Your hands move sluggishly, and your head nods gently, almost politely. Medieval folks had no concept of a proper nap. No clock strikes noon. There is no designated rest period. But everyone nodded off at least once a day. They called it the moment your body gently betrayed you. You've seen the blacksmith mid-pour suddenly freeze in place, ladle in hand, body upright, eyes closed, not collapsing, just paused. People pass by, but they don't disturb him. Because everyone understands, it's the sacred midday drowsiness, as holy as prayer time. You once dozed off while fluffing straw. You didn't notice when your eyes closed. When you came, you hugged the straw like a teddy bear instead of tossing it into the basket. This kind of sleep isn't like nighttime rest. It's light, drifting, dreamless. It's like your brain hit the pause button and came back online as soon as a chicken squawked or your uncle coughed like thunder. You've seen your mother crouch by the stove, tending the fire, and gently slumped forward and napped. Only a few minutes. When she woke, she smiled. The embers were so warm, like a lullaby. In summer, sleep drifts in with sunbeams through the roof. You're mending a shirt, and your head starts to tilt. Sunlight filters through your hair, your fabric, and you feel like a vegetable gently wilting in the heat. In winter, drowsiness hides in the sound of crackling coals. You're sitting by the fire, holding a bowl of porridge, and you snap awake to find it cold, and the cat has claimed your lap. Napping in the middle of the day doesn't require a bed, a sack of straw, a tree trunk, a sunny corner of the yard. Even a well-piled mound of turnips, if arranged just right, is enough for you to rest your head for a few precious minutes. Grandma once said, "Midday naps are how the gods remind us that even the sun needs a break." You thought she was joking. Until one day, while planting onions, you looked at the sun, and it did seem a bit lazy. Everyone in the village had their style of midday sleep. Some slept sitting, some are half lying. Some napped with their hands still weaving, and woke to discover they'd shaped a basket that looked like a duck. One young man fell asleep on his cow's back while herding. The cow kept walking. He stayed asleep. No one noticed until the cow reached home with him still on top, dreaming his way across the meadow. You don't feel guilty when you nap like that, because you understand, your body is borrowing some time to repair itself. Like a blacksmith pausing to oil his hammer. Like a monk shaking out his wrist mid-scribe. It's like a cat napping all day but always ready to ruin your quiet moment. These naps do not last long. 5 minutes. 10. Just enough to reboot part of your brain. Just enough to avoid saying things like, "Yes, I will marry the onion and raise cats." When you wake up, you're a little dazed. Eyes itchy, shoulders stiff, but your mind is lighter. You rise, shake your head, stretch. Someone asks, "Are you napping?" You grin. "Ah, just thinking deeply." And they nod, because everyone has thought deeply before. In the kitchen, in the yard, in the middle of a chaotic day where your eyes can't stay open. You carry on, sickle in hand, eyes on the turnips. Your steps are slow, and in your heart, you quietly thank the gods. Thank you for blessing you with such lovely stolen naps. No one talks about this over dinner, but here's the truth. Where you sleep changes throughout the year. Not because you have a winter home and a summer retreat. You're not a count. But because you live in medieval times, where sleeping isn't a fixed affair. It's more like tending a fire, bubbling in the morning, lukewarm by noon, rekindled at night. In winter, everyone bunches together. The closer, the better. You, your sibling, grandma, your aunt, sometimes even a sickly chicken, all huddled on a wooden platform or a high pile of straw. Blankets are limited. People are not. The sleeping arrangement is a logic puzzle. How to fit 6 humans, 2 animals, and a kettle into a 2-meter space without anyone being kicked out of the game. You've slept between 2 adults, and every time they turned, you had to adjust like someone in a canoe. Some nights you didn't sleep. You just drifted on a sea of shifting limbs. But hey, it was warm. Even if one side of your face was pressed against an elbow and the other against a heel, you weren't freezing. You fell asleep to the sound of steady breathing, and the scent of sweat, turnips, and damp wool became the background fragrance of winter dreams. Then spring comes, and everything begins to loosen. The air feels kinder. You no longer need to cling to grandma to keep your blood circulating. People start spreading out a bit. Some even migrate toward the door. Your dad is the pioneer. He says, "Spring breeze is good for the lungs." But your mom warns, spring breeze is also good for catching colds. Still, he gradually shifts his position night by night until he sleeps near the chicken coop. You figure maybe he just wanted some peace. Summer is the season of complete freedom. No one piles up anymore. People are scattered like sun-dried herbs, on beds, on floors, under porches, beneath trees, next to wells. Whoever finds a cool spot wins. You've slept in the yard before. Spread a mat. I used a bundle of firewood as a pillow. The night breeze was glorious. The moon was bright and proud. A cat strutted across your belly like it was a runway. You stared at the stars, imagining yourself drifting in a dreamy sea, until a mosquito bit your ear, and you woke up with a red welt on your forehead. Sleeping in summer has its charm. You're not curled up like a pretzel. No one hogs the blanket. But there's no defense against bugs, barking dogs, or the sharp scent of fertilizer from the neighbor's garden. One night, you were fast asleep when you heard a thump. You opened your eyes. A bat was dangling upside down on the clothesline. You quietly scooted 3 steps away, covered yourself with a thin sheet, and whispered, "Let's pretend we're friends." Autumn is when people start to gather again, not necessarily because it's cold, but because they miss each other. After a summer of sleeping apart, something is comforting about hearing your loved ones breathing close by. Grandma rustling in her sleep, the cat grumbling after getting stepped on. You start dragging your mat closer to the door. Your sibling edges their pillow toward yours. Not all the way, but close enough to feel someone's presence. Grandma quietly moves from the porch back inside. Your aunt once declared, "It's cooler outside," suddenly complains about mosquitoes and returns to her old spot. And just like that, the house is whole again, crowded but lively. The insects are quieter now, replaced by familiar snoring. No more stargazing, but the kitchen lantern flickers through the cracks, reminding you that you're not alone. You realize something. Where you sleep matters less than who you sleep near. You could be on a dirt floor. You might not have enough blankets. But if you hear someone close, breathing steadily, shifting softly, dreaming nearby, your heart feels warmer than any firewood. That night was so cold, and the wind was shivering. You still remember it, not because it was extraordinary, but because your body has never forgotten that cold. Everyone knew when the coldest night of the year was coming. No calendar is needed. No fortune teller either. Just your knees and spine would tell you. That afternoon, the clouds hung heavy like old canvas. The sun didn't bother to show up. The wind slipped through the cracks in the walls like a sly snake. People spoke less. Their hands worked faster. Everyone just wanted to finish before the night slammed down like a blanket of ice. You rushed to gather firewood, arrange the bedding, scrape the last of yesterday's porridge, add water, some turnip, plus a bit of leftover fat scraped from the bottom of the jar. Not tasty, but it was warm. By the time it got dark, the fire was already burning. Everyone sat close together, each person with their patch of straw, a corner of blanket, and a quiet sigh. No one complained, but everyone knew that tonight would be long. You watched quietly. Grandma wrapped extra cloth around her knees. Your father pulled a sack over his feet and let the cat lie on them like a second layer of fur. Your mother warned, "Don't let your head stick out. The cold sneaks in through your ears first." You nodded and curled up. Not easy. The blanket was too short. Your body is longer than the straw. And feet. Feet were always the first to be sacrificed. You lay next to your sibling. You tucked your arm around them like someone keeping an egg warm. They didn't object. They were cold too. The wind howled through the cracks in the door. It sounded like someone wailing across the field. You curled up tighter, buried your head on your mother's side. The fire still burned, but the light was fading. There wasn't enough wood to keep it going all night. Medieval people didn't have modern heaters. No electric blankets. No fuzzy socks. Their only way to stay warm is body heat and hope. Some used hot stones, kept near the hearth all afternoon, then brought to bed. But stones cooled quickly, and sometimes cracked with a loud pop that made you think someone broke a tooth in their sleep. Some households had homemade warm water jugs. You tried it once. But when the jar burst under your feet, you learned that cold nights were better than wet ones. Grandma had an old trick: eat garlic before bed. She said it warmed you from the inside out. You tried it once. You weren't cold, but no one wanted to lie near you. That night, you turned dozens of times. I'm looking for a corner without a draft, a forgotten edge of a blanket, a hand to hold, to remind yourself you were still here. Every time you opened your eyes, the hearth glowed faintly red, a tiny light, like a fragile hope in the night. You didn't cry, but your eyes stung. Maybe from the smoke, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from the cold that reached where even tears could freeze. Once, you reached your hand out from the blanket to scratch, and it took 5 minutes of courage to bring it back in. The wind didn't stop. It tapped the walls, swept the floor, searched through every gap in the thatched fence like it was trying to find your heart. You thought of summer, of lying outside under the moon, cool breeze singing lullabies, and you thought, was summer really that luxurious? Your sibling let out a tiny breath. You pressed your ear to their chest, hearing the heartbeat. Each thump reminded you that the night hadn't swallowed you whole. When you finally drifted off, or at least slipped into that half-conscious haze, you dreamed of standing in a snowy field, wrapped in a massive cloud-soft blanket. But when you woke up, it was just your uncle who had rolled over and pinned your legs. The next morning you didn't feel rested, just alive. You sat up, shoulders sore, feet numb, face stiff like a stone. But you smelled onions. I heard the broom sweeping, and you knew. The long night was over. You looked around. Everyone was still there, huddled, cold, but smiling. Someone asked, "Was it cold?" You replied, "Cold, yes, but still warm." Warm where? Warm in the heart. You grew up with others, not just living together, eating together, working together, but sleeping together too. From the first day you were placed on a bed of straw next to your mother to the nights wedged between your grandmother, your aunt, and the family cat curled around your head, sleep was never a private affair. Because of that, it became something even more precious. In your time, no one had a room of their own. No one had a special mattress. No one shut the door, locked the latch, turned on a nightlight, and curled into luxurious solitude. Medieval people slept with each other, close to each other, with each other. You once slept so close to your sibling that your foreheads touched, and you both woke up with your hair tangled together. You listened to your grandmother breathing steadily beside you, lulling you to sleep by simply existing. You've been clutched in your uncle's arms as he muttered nonsense in his sleep, holding you like a sack of flour. There was no private space, but you had something modern life often lacks, a sense of belonging. Every night was a symphony of breathing, shifting, straw rustling, and cats licking their paws. A chaotic orchestra is strangely peaceful. You once thought, I wish I had a bed all to myself. And then you tried it, on a rare night when the house was less crowded. You laid out straw, pulled up a blanket, and lay alone. No one kicked you. No one mumbled. No one stirred and woke you. And you couldn't sleep. It was too quiet, too wide, too empty without the familiar rhythm of breath nearby. You realized that sleep isn't just about rest. It's how you feel the presence of others. Medieval people understood that. They didn't need to explain it. Just lying near one another was enough. Your grandmother once told you, when I was young, I slept with 7 sisters. Each had her own corner. On cold nights, we tangled our legs together like tree roots. Was it warm? You asked. Warm, yes, but itchy. You laughed. Sleeping together came with its own rules. Those who tossed and turned had to lie on the edge. Those who ran hot used fewer blankets. Sleep talkers got placed next to the cat. Each night, you lay beside family, and each night, you learned something new. You learned your sibling twitched in dreams. Your uncle snored in triple rhythm. Your grandmother always rested one hand on her belly, like she was holding her heart in place. Sleep wasn't about escaping the world. It was about quietly joining it, without words, just a soft presence. One night, you woke to find your siblings silently crying. They didn't call out, just tears. You didn't ask why. You reached over and held them, and they stopped. Another night, you were feverish, sweating, shivering. No one woke completely, but 3 people beside you pushed their blankets toward you, silently, wordlessly, and by morning, you felt better. Here, sharing isn't grand. It's a habit. It's instinct. It's how people survive and how they love. Sleep is when humans are most vulnerable. You close your eyes, you relax, you surrender your body to the night. And oddly enough, you only dare to do that when you know someone is nearby. A quiet sound, a slow breath, a toe draped across your leg, a hand that unconsciously grabs yours in the dark. Nothing's perfect. Blankets still get stolen. Snoring still happens. And sometimes, you accidentally lie next to a cat, dreaming of battle. But nothing needs fixing. Because within that messiness, you find real sleep. The sleep of someone who knows they are not alone. The sleep of someone in a small, modest, inconvenient, but warm community. You glance around one last time. Everyone's asleep. Only the fire murmurs its ancient lullaby. You exhale, softly, deeply, and you sleep. Not just for yourself, but with everyone. You wake up on an early spring morning, not because someone called you, not because the rooster crowed, just a soft light slipping through the thatched roof. You open your eyes and realize you've made it. Another winter, gone. Another string of freezing nights, numb mornings, days of little firewood, little food, little sleep, but never little love. You pull up the blanket and stretch, your body aching. But it's the ache of a body that's still going. No one throws a celebration. There's no feast. But everyone knows, quietly, we made it. Your grandmother sets a pot of porridge on the fire, no longer with trembling hands like the month before. Your mother hums softly as she lights the flame. Your father whistles some strange little tune no one quite recognizes. You glance out to the yard. The snow has melted into a sheen of thin mud. A tiny green leaf peeks out from beneath the old turnip stalks, and you feel something tender and profound. Not pride, not relief, just gratitude. Gratitude that you slept through the cold. and weren't alone. Gratitude that you woke up tired and still had a reason to rise. Gratitude that the sleep you shared, the torn blanket, the old straw, the warmth from someone's shoulder was its quiet promise. We're here, together. You press your hands to the ground and rise. Your feet are still cold, but your heart is warm, like the fire at the start of the day. You step outside. Take a deep breath. The wind is still crisp, but now it carries something new. The scent of soil, of sprouts, of a future gently uncorking its jar and whispering, "Hey, I'm here now. Now lie still. There's nothing more you need to do. There is nothing more you need to think about. You've made it through a long winter, not just on small feet, but with patience, understanding, and the quiet magic of sharing. The wind through the cracks, the soft crackle of the hearth, the gentle breath of someone nearby. They've all become memories now. A thin blanket laid gently over your dreams. You're not afraid of the cold anymore, because you've learned how to stay warm with what you have. An old blanket, a hand held, a sibling stirring beside you, a cat draping its paw across your chest. That life, though lacking comfort, was enough to make you feel held in this vast world. And now, in the blurry light behind your eyelids, only tenderness remains. Peace. Stillness. Take a slow breath. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your body drift like a small boat on warm waters. Drift softly, slowly, to a place with no words, no wind, only your breath, dissolving gently into the night. Sleep well. You survived. And tomorrow will be another day.